Hey guys, welcome to this special bonus episode of Tell Me More About as we dig into Genesis 38, the bizarre story of Judah and Tamar. We're going to look at it right now. And if you missed the previous episode that we recorded, so we dropped two this week, we did that with Heather, and it's so good. We're talking about kind of what it means to be in the meantime season. So that's a little bit more practical. This one's going to be Bible study. So let's jump in.
So I had a couple people come up to me after service and say, if we don't talk about Genesis 38, they're going to be really disappointed. Yeah. My seminary professor used to say, like, if you're reading in the Bible and all of a sudden something pops up that's like, whoa, what is that? Like if you were driving in a car and you run into something, you don't just like drive past and think,
stop
whatever.
and stare.
You do. You turn around and you investigate.
Sure.
So that's what we're going to do with Genesis 38, just a little bit. Yeah. So we're in the middle of the story of Joseph.
Right.
And then we get Judah.
Judah and Tamar.
We need to take a pit stop here and look at Judah and Tamar.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think is going on here?
Oh man, there's so much going on here. I think, good questions to ask are, why is this here? And I think what we could say, so a couple things I think we need to kind of acknowledge going into this is, one, we're reading this in a wildly different culture. And I think we're going to have to, you're going to have to, some of this story, I think, and even the notion of why it's here is going to be maybe difficult for us to see because of culturally how we view the world. So we're going to run into some of those things. I think secondly, I think we have to be comfortable with the fact that we're not going to have like a clear answer at the end of this. It's exactly why this is here. I think there's some interesting questions that we can ask, or maybe parallels that we can draw. But to say this is why this story is here and exactly what it's teaching us is a little bit hazy. There's different ways to view it, as there are with certain parts of Scripture. There are just parts where you go, some people see it this way. Other people see it this way. Depending on your point of view and how you view the Scriptures, it does depend on how you're going to look at this.
I think we do see something with Judah being significant later in the story of Joseph. And so
But is this a turning point? And it could be. So like Ethan thinks it's a turning point in Judah's story. Another way to look at it is he is a contrast to Joseph. So you see what where Joseph is going to resist the temptation of Potiphar's wife in chapter 39. Judah will fail to do that in chapter 38. So you're getting this contrast of brothers, of how one is unrighteous in Judah and dishonest and honestly is defrauding his own daughter-in-law. And then here we see Joseph doing what's right by his master in Potiphar, even though it hurts him. So there's a couple different ways you can view it, and I don't know that there's one that you could say definitively that's the right way to view it.
Yeah. So we see Judah, if we want to do like just a general overview of chapter 38.
Right.
We see Judah kind of going off to do his own thing, essentially. Like he leaves the family, he goes down and he hangs out with this guy named Hira, the Adulamite.
Right.
And then he sees the daughter of Shua, and he's like, she's cute. And so they start a family, and he has 3 sons.
Right.
And so he finds a wife for his first son. And then it says kind of inexplicably that the Lord kills him.
So a few things I think would also be helpful to kind of talk about here in terms of context. One, the biblical authors are not nearly as concerned with chronology as we are. So things are not always in order. That's one thing you have to recognize, because this we don't know when this happened. So how old was Joseph? Was Joseph even born yet when this happened?
Yeah.
We don't know. Just because it falls within the story of Joseph doesn't mean it happened in like between the events of chapter 37 and 39.
Right.
The author chose to Moses chose to place this here.
Editorial intent
exactly.
here. Yeah.
The second thing is that you're going to see a lot of things attributed to God. And in fact, the Old Testament sort of works that way. It's just because people saw, and you're going to see that in chapter 39, that the Lord was with Joseph, and he was, but that also Potiphar saw that. But again, that's how they would have responded. People in that time attributed things they couldn't understand or place. Everything just went to God. So if Judah's son dies, God judged him. That's just the way. Remember the story of when the tower fell on people in the New Testament, and the disciples of Jesus come to him and they say, "Hey, who sinned that this happened?" And Jesus is like, "What are you talking about? That's not how this works." But essentially, they would read into all of their actions some cosmic God's response.
Yeah.
So here we're seeing that the Lord put him to death, and maybe he did, but also that's just how they saw things. So we see that these sons are dying here, right? These sons keep dying.
Yeah. So the first son dies,
Right.
and then it would be the role of the second son to marry the widow of the first son and to provide
That's right.
basically an heir for the son who passed away.
So let's talk about why is that the case? Like, why did they do that?
I don't know if this is too crass of a way to put it, but there's some economy here.
Absolutely.
With the way that having sons and carrying on like
Yes. Survival.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
provision. It's how you provide for your family.
Yeah.
That's how, and I think the thing that we have to, again, who is it? Sandy Richter talked about this, and there's a great podcast. Maybe we'll link to it in our show notes to it. It's a podcast on theology in the raw, where she gives a talk on kind of
women in the Old Testament.
Women in the Old Testament. It's a fascinating talk, and she's brilliant.
Yeah.
But the idea is that our concepts of marriage and theirs were like the purpose of marriage wildly different. Is to provide heirs, to take care of the family. That's why there's so much emphasis on having a child, having a son, because it's the only way you can carry on the family line. But also, that's how these families lived together, like extended families living together. And so it's within the family that justice is done, that you're finding, like, that's how you're provided for. That's where because there's no hospitals, there's no police force, there's no welfare. Like, where else can you go? So if you have no husband and if you have no son, you have nothing.
Yeah.
You're cut off, essentially.
And the second born son knows that all of dad's inheritance is going to pass over him.
That's right.
It's not going to stay with him, even though his older brother
Because she was married to the oldest son. So that's what's so grievous about what Onan does, is that he defrauds this woman, Tamar, of what is rightfully hers. But not just Onan, Judah does the same thing by holding back his son. He's deeply defrauding this woman, and she is terribly vulnerable. She's been married.
She has to go back to so after he's like, okay, his second son dies. He's like, you can wait for my third son. Go back to the house of your father.
Right.
And that's disgraceful.
Yeah.
She has no way of making a living or anything like that. She's just basically shut away as a widow until his youngest son grows up, maybe. And
so she's been waiting all this time.
Yeah.
And Judah's not delivering on his promise, and she can see this. So she determines to take matters into her own hands. And so she dresses up like a prostitute. She hears that Judah's going to this place. So she goes ahead of him, she takes off her widow's garb, which is fascinating because she would have been wearing this probably for quite some time. And now she is wearing the veil of a prostitute. Interesting, yet again, a robe or a garment is being used to deceive, right? We get that story's been kind of, that storyline or theme has been rolling through the story of Joseph. She puts this on, poses as a prostitute. Judah sees her, negotiates this whole, so it's one thing you got to love about the Bible is it just does not flinch. It just takes this raw look at what happens, this whole negotiation for sex that goes on around a goat, and the guarantee that you're going to that you're going to pay me or send me this goat.
So he hands over his signet ring, his staff, and his cord.
Yeah. So what's the significance of these things?
So these are his like identification. Basically, like if you wanted to like say, okay, I will come back for this later. You might leave like your driver's license or as a guarantee that I will be back.
Yes.
And so he essentially does that. He leaves his driver's license and his social security card and like everything that he would need to identify who he is with her.
So she conceives, and then Judah goes kind of on about his business, gets back home, supposedly, sends this goat with the same dude that brought him down there, Hira, send the goat back to this prostitute. He goes looking for her. She's not there. He comes back and he tells Judah, and at which point he's just like, well, what can we do? I tried to do right by this woman. I sent the goat, whatever, she's gone.
And he doesn't want to be embarrassed, so he'd rather lose his driver's license.
That's right.
Than actually...
Again, and I think we can relate to that, but this is also a shame and honor culture motivated by a lot different things than what we're motivated by. So he's humiliation, embarrassment, socially is a big, big, big thing. He doesn't want that, so he just kind of lets the thing go. And then word comes to him a few months later that his daughter-in-law, Tamar, is pregnant. And it's so kind of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, bring out the burner, just burn her. Burn the witch.
I know, it's pretty extreme.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we go from him saying, it's okay, like, we don't want to be laughed at, to like this extreme kind of
it's fascinating,
reaction.
This duplicity here of how he's behaving himself.
Yes.
And the harsh judgments that he's just, like, so he's just kind of getting by with everything. And then she turns up pregnant, and immediately it's like, bring her out and burn her.
And it is the shame honor culture there again, in the way that integrity plays a part in that, because he's hidden. He has nothing, like he is not exposed in any way in what he's done wrong, as far as he knows.
Right.
But when it comes to, no, this is actually what happened, which what does happen.
Yeah. So she sends she sends a messenger with his driver's license, social security card, car keys, whatever. And she says, by the man who owns these things, and this is how I'm pregnant. The guy whoever's stuff this belongs to, this is how I'm pregnant.
Oh man!
And then she says, and it's fascinating. Let's see, it's verse. I'm going to look it up here. 25. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, by the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. And she said, I love this. Please identify whose these are. I mean, just such a boss move. But what's fascinating is that these are the same words, because if you go back one chapter, what you're finding is in verse 32, when they sinned. So when the brothers lie about Joseph being dead, they sin back. It says, verse 32, and they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, this we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not. And it's just, again, same words. That's no accident. When you find repeated words, repeated phrases, the author is trying to link you to, hey, notice this happened. See this parallel. And so Judah is now being deceived in the same way that he deceived. And it's interesting, again, when you think about it, like chronologically, this could have happened before he deceived his father. We don't know, right?
Yeah.
So it could have happened before, or maybe it happened just after, not sure. But regardless, there's a parallel here in the fact that deception is being worked out against him and by him using these same words. So Judah's response, and it's fascinating, again, and specifically kind of Christian culture, now we read this and we think of Tamar's actions as, let's say, dubious at best.
Yeah.
Sinful. She dressed up like a prostitute. She's sleeping with her father-in-law. This is so weird. But notice how Judah responds. Like, what's the sin he's guilty of? He does not say, oh my goodness, I've been sexually unfaithful. Now, his wife is dead.
Yeah.
But I slept with a prostitute and I should not have. I've been caught out sexually. That's not how he responds. Verse 26, then Judah identified them and said, she is more righteous than I. Well, first of all, so the assessment of her is that she's righteous, not this loose, dubious woman who's done some crazy thing, but that within the kind of confines or within the sort of cultural practice of her day, she did what she could to get what was rightfully hers and actually what should have been done, that an heir should have been produced for her. But she had been defrauded time and again. Judah responds, she is more righteous than I. Look, what does he say? He says, since I did not give her to my son, Shelah, and he did not know her again. Fascinating. So you have this woman who's, how would you put it? I'm reminded of some New Testament stories of just this sort of maybe the I don't know if it's the Yiddish or Jewish word chutzpah. She's got this kind of tenacity about her. Where she just is not going to take no for an answer. So,
this is interesting. It's either I stay in my situation and I die,
right,
or I do something about it.
Fascinating, interesting, and I'm just thinking about this, but what a parallel to Genesis 39, right?
I know.
She has found
cool?
herself in this purgatory situation, much like Joseph is in, but rather than just sitting back and saying, well, woe is me, why am I here? She in the craziest way, and it makes us so uncomfortable to say it, but she makes the most of her season. Isn't that wild? Like it is weird to think about, but she truly does.
At some point, it does require her taking a really huge risk.
Absolutely.
Because the potential for her to not be listened to, or for her to be cast aside, essentially, for him to say, I don't care. Culturally, he might have had the upper hand in that situation. Right. And so this could have gone very badly for her.
As it turns out, though, she ends up in the lineage of Christ.
She does. Yeah.
And it's interesting. And her story is recorded here. And the words about her are that she is more righteous than Judah. And so anyway, it's fascinating. So a lot of parallels here. It's a weird story.
It's a weird story, but it's fun to look at.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And there are fascinating things here. And anyway, hopefully this makes you interested to read your Bible in a more kind of careful way and go, what's going on here? Because when you really start looking for it, you can start to see, wow, this book is brilliant, how it connects. So,
really
cool.